Jack Turner's eyes cracked open at 5:30 a.m., just like they had every morning since his time in the service. The thin light seeping through worn curtains barely illuminated his small apartment, but it was enough to see the emptiness. He sat up slowly on his fold-out couch, careful not to let the springs creak and wake Lily in the bedroom. His joints ached as he made his way to the kitchen table. The familiar weight of worry settled on his shoulders as he pulled out the crumpled bills and loose change from his wallet. His calloused fingers smoothed each wrinkled dollar, arranging them in a neat pile. $5.37. That's all that was left. Jack's stomach twisted as he glanced at the nearly empty fridge. A half-gallon of milk, 2 eggs, and some wilted lettuce stared back at him. The cupboards weren't much better, just a few cans of soup and some stale cereal. But today wasn't just any day. It was Lily's 8th birthday. He picked up one of the worn bills, turning it over in his hands. The responsible thing would be to save it for rent. They were already 2 weeks behind, and Mrs. Martinez, their landlord, had been giving him concerned looks in the hallway. His pride stung at the thought of falling further behind. The sound of Lily turning in her sleep drifted from the bedroom. Jack closed his eyes, remembering her excitement last night as she'd gone to bed. "Tomorrow's my birthday, Daddy," she'd said, her eyes sparkling. "I'm going to be 8 whole years old." A small smile tugged at his lips despite the heaviness in his chest. Sarah would have wanted Lily to have a cake. His late wife had always made birthdays special, even when times were tough. Jack gathered the money and tucked it carefully into his pocket. Some things were worth more than pride. He got up and started the morning routine. A quick shower in the lukewarm water, then a clean but well-worn shirt and his only pair of decent jeans. By the time Lily's alarm went off at 7:00, he had managed to scrape together a breakfast of toast and the last of the eggs. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," he said as she bounded into the kitchen, her brown curls still messy from sleep. "Thank you, Daddy." Lily threw her arms around his waist, squeezing tight. Her smile was pure sunshine, just like her mother's had been. "I've got a surprise for you later," he said, ruffling her hair. "After school." Lily's eyes lit up. "Really? What is it? Wouldn't be a surprise if I told you, would it?" He managed a playful wink, even as his stomach clenched at the thought of how small the surprise would have to be. The walk to school was filled with Lily's chatter about her friends and what they might do in class for her birthday. Jack held her small hand in his, treasuring these moments when she seemed untouched by their struggles. At the school gates, Lily gave him another quick hug. "See you after school, Daddy. I can't wait for my surprise. Have a great day, birthday girl." He watched until she disappeared inside the building, her backpack bouncing with each step. The grocery store was only a few blocks away, but Jack's feet felt heavier with each step. The automatic doors slid open, with a cheerful ding that seemed to mock his situation. He nodded stiffly at the greeter and made his way to the bakery section, trying to look casual as he studied the prices. The cakes behind the glass case looked impossibly expensive. His heart sank as he saw the prices: 15.99, 18.99, 24.99. Even the small ones were well beyond his means. He spotted a shelf of day-old baked goods marked down for quick sale. There, among the slightly squashed bread and dented boxes, sat a small round cake with white frosting. The price tag read $4.99. Jack picked it up carefully, examining it from all angles. The frosting was a bit smudged on one side, but it was still a real birthday cake. He counted his money again, though he already knew exactly how much he had. $5.37. Just enough. The walk to the checkout felt like miles. Each step seemed to echo in his ears as he approached the register, keenly aware of his shabby clothes and the cheap cake in his hands. The cashier was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read. Jack set the cake down carefully, keeping his eyes fixed on the counter as he pulled out his money. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed out the wrinkled bills. $1 was so worn it was soft as cloth, its edges frayed from being folded and refolded too many times. "Just this today?" Maria asked gently. Jack nodded, still not meeting her eyes. He could feel heat creeping up his neck as he counted out the coins: 3 quarters, 2 dimes, and 7 pennies. One of the pennies was so old the copper had turned dark brown. The register beeped as Maria rang up the cake. 4.99. She confirmed. Jack handed over the money, his throat tight. The bills shook slightly in his grip as he passed them across the counter. Each coin made a small clicking sound as he set them down, the sound seeming to echo in his ears like gunshots. His heart pounded as Maria counted the money. He knew what he must look like, a grown man paying for a cheap cake with coins, probably looking like he just pulled them from between his couch cushions. The fluorescent light suddenly felt too bright, too exposing. Jack kept his eyes fixed on the counter, studying a small scratch in the surface while he waited. He could feel other customers in line behind him, imagining their impatient stares burning into his back. The moment stretched out like taffy, each second an eternity of humiliation. This wasn't how he'd imagined life would be when he'd returned from his service. He'd had plans, dreams, a future mapped out with Sarah. Now here he was, counting pennies for his daughter's birthday cake, praying it would be enough to see a smile on her face. The coins clinked as Maria gathered them up. Jack's hands remained frozen on the edge of the counter, his knuckles white with tension as he waited for the transaction to be complete, for this moment of shame to finally end. Maria Lopez's shoulders ached from her long shift at Register 3. 8 hours of scanning groceries and making small talk had taken their toll, but she kept a gentle smile on her face. That's when she noticed him, a tall man in worn jeans and a faded blue work shirt, holding a small birthday cake like it was made of glass. His hands trembled as he set the cake on the counter. Maria's heart tightened as she watched him count out crumpled dollar bills and coins, his eyes fixed downward, shoulders hunched as if trying to make himself smaller. She'd seen that look before, in her own mirror, during the hard months after leaving her husband. "That'll be $12.58, she said softly, pretending not to notice how his fingers shook as he counted out the money. The man, Jack, she'd later learn, laid out $11 in worn bills and began counting pennies. His cheeks flushed red as other customers shifted impatiently behind him. A quiet, "I'm sorry," escaped his lips as he recounted the coins. Maria glanced at the simple chocolate cake with its plain white frosting. No decorations, no writing, the cheapest one they sold. Her eyes drifted to his left hand. No ring, but a pale line where one used to be. She thought of her own son's upcoming birthday and made a decision. "Sir," she said, reaching under the counter. "These come with the cake." She pulled out a package of birthday candles and a bright red balloon. Before he could protest, she quickly inflated it with helium and tied it with a ribbon. "Oh no, I can't," he started, his voice rough with emotion. "Every child deserves a birthday," Maria said firmly but kindly, already bagging the items. She quietly slipped a 20 from her wallet into the register when he wasn't looking, making up the difference, and then some. "But, please," she said, meeting his eyes for the first time. They were deep brown and filled with a pain she recognized. "Take them. Make someone's day special." Jack stood frozen for a moment, one hand gripping the counter. Maria could see the internal struggle playing across his face, pride wrestling with desperation, shame dancing with gratitude. Finally, he gave a slight nod, gathered the bag and balloon with trembling hands, and hurried toward the exit. "God bless," Maria called after him softly. Later that evening, Jack stood in his small kitchen, carefully arranging 8 candles on the chocolate cake. The red balloon bobbed cheerfully against the ceiling, adding a splash of color to the otherwise sparse room. His hands were steady now as he lit each candle, the tiny flames casting warm light across the scratched formica table. "Lily," he called. "Come out here, birthday girl." The padding of small feet preceded his daughter's appearance. Lily emerged from her room in pajamas decorated with unicorns, her dark curls still damp from her bath. She stopped in the doorway, eyes wide at the glowing cake and floating balloon. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Jack said, his throat tight with emotion. "Daddy!" Lily squealed, launching herself at him. Her thin arms wrapped around his waist, squeezing tight. "It's beautiful, and look at the balloon." Jack lifted her onto his hip, though at 8 she was almost too big for this now. Her face glowed in the candlelight, eyes sparkling with joy that made his heart ache. This was worth every penny, worth any amount of pride he had to swallow. "Make a wish," he whispered. Lily closed her eyes tight, thinking hard, then blew out all 8 candles in one breath. Jack clapped and set her down, cutting 2 generous slices of cake. They sat at the bare kitchen table, but neither noticed its emptiness. Lily chatted excitedly about her day at school, chocolate frosting smeared across her chin. Her laughter filled the small apartment, making it feel more like home than it had in months. "This is the best birthday ever, Daddy," Lily declared, licking frosting from her fork. Jack smiled, watching her joy, remembering the kindness of the cashier who had made this moment possible. "It sure is, baby girl." After stories and tucking in and one last birthday hug, Jack closed Lily's bedroom door softly. He walked back to the kitchen, where dishes were done and the remaining cake sat covered in plastic wrap. The red balloon still danced near the ceiling, catching the dim light from above the stove. Jack sank into a kitchen chair, suddenly exhausted. The day's emotions caught up with him, the morning's despair, the shame at the grocery store, and then that unexpected kindness. He looked up at the balloon, remembering the gentle smile of the cashier, the way she'd insisted on giving more than he could pay for. "Thank you, whoever you are," he whispered into the quiet kitchen. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he had to offer. In the darkness of his apartment, with his daughter sleeping peacefully and a red balloon keeping watch, Jack realized that sometimes kindness could shine brighter than any darkness, even his own. Maria arrived early for her morning shift, her stomach in knots. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she straightened her name tag and rehearsed what she'd say to Mr. Peterson, the store manager. She found him in his tiny office, surrounded by inventory sheets and schedules. "Mr. Peterson?" Maria's voice came out softer than she intended. "Do you have a minute?" "Minute." He looked up from his paperwork, his reading glasses perched on the edge of his nose.
"Of course, Maria. Everything okay?"
She twisted her hands together. "I need to tell you something about yesterday's register count." The words tumbled out as she explained about Jack, the birthday cake, and how she'd covered the difference herself. "I know I should have asked first. I'm sorry." Mr. Peterson's expression softened as she spoke. To her surprise, he smiled and leaned back in his creaky chair. "You know, Maria, my mother used to say that kindness multiplies like yeast in bread." He stood up and walked to his filing cabinet, pulling out an empty glass jar. "Instead of worrying about what you did yesterday, let's try something." 20 minutes later, Maria watched as Mr. Peterson placed the jar near her register with a handwritten sign, "Neighbors helping neighbors." Because sometimes we all need a little help. He dropped in the first $5 bill himself. Throughout her shift, Maria noticed customers reading the sign. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop added her spare change. The high school basketball coach contributed a $10 bill. By lunchtime, the jar held nearly $50. Across town, Jack Turner stood on his elderly neighbor's porch, hammer in hand. Mrs. Rodriguez had let Lily borrow sugar for the birthday cake, and he'd noticed her broken step on the way out. The wood was splintered, a hazard waiting to happen. "You don't have to do this, Jack," Mrs. Rodriguez called from her screen door. "It's no trouble," he replied, measuring the board he'd found in his garage. "Can't have anyone taking a bad fall." The familiar rhythm of work settled his mind, each strike of the hammer feeling like a small payment toward the kindness he'd received. The autumn sun warmed his back as he worked, and the fresh sawdust reminded him of better days in his father's workshop. He secured the last nail just as Lily's school bus rumbled down the street. "Daddy!" Lily bounded up the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing. "You'll never guess what happened at school today." Jack gathered his tools, waving goodbye to Mrs. Rodriguez. "What happened, sweetheart?" "During lunch, everyone in my class sang happy birthday to me, even Tommy Wilson, and he never sings." Lily skipped alongside him as they walked the short distance home. "And Miss Peters gave me a special birthday pencil with stars on it." In their small kitchen, Jack reheated yesterday's birthday cake while Lily chatted about her day. The leftover slice wasn't much, but Lily's eyes sparkled as if it were a feast fit for a queen. She carefully broke her piece in half, pushing the bigger portion toward him. "Here, Daddy, we can share." Jack's throat tightened. "That's your birthday cake, honey. But sharing makes it taste better," she insisted, with the simple wisdom of childhood. As they ate, Jack noticed how the setting sun caught the balloon from yesterday, still floating in the corner. Its cheerful red surface glowed like a beacon, reminding him of the cashier's unexpected kindness. Later that evening, back at the grocery store, a woman in a pressed blazer paused by register 3. She adjusted her press badge and studied the jar, now nearly full with bills and coins. Maria watched as she pulled out a small notebook and began writing. "Excuse me," the reporter said, "but I'd love to hear the story behind this jar." In Jack's apartment, the day's last light filtered through worn curtains as he tucked Lily into bed. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily, "today was the best birthday ever." Jack smoothed her hair back, remembering the cake, the balloon, the kindness of strangers, and his own small act of repair. For the first time in months, the weight in his chest felt a little lighter, like maybe, just maybe, things could get better. He kissed her forehead. "Sleep tight, princess. Night, Daddy." Lily snuggled deeper under her covers, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Love you to the moon, and back." He finished their nightly ritual, standing in her doorway for a moment longer. The birthday balloon bobbed gently in the corner, a reminder that even in their hardest times, unexpected grace could appear. Yesterday, it had come in the form of a kind cashier. Today, it was the satisfaction of fixing Mrs. Rodriguez's step and hearing about his. The Sunday morning sun streamed through the windows of Lou's diner, casting warm squares of light across the worn vinyl booths. Jack watched as Lily carefully cut into her stack of blueberry pancakes, her face beaming with delight. The voucher for free breakfast had appeared mysteriously in their mailbox yesterday, and though his pride stung, he couldn't deny his daughter this simple joy. "Daddy, can I put more syrup on?" Lily asked, her fork poised mid-air. "Sure, princess. Just a little, though. Don't want you bouncing off the walls all day," Jack said with a gentle smile, reaching for the local newspaper someone had left behind. His eyes scanned the front page absently until a familiar storefront caught his attention. There, in black and white, was Maria's grocery store. The headline read, "Local grocery stores Neighbors Helping Neighbors program spreads hope." Jack's hands tightened on the paper as he read further. What started as one cashier's act of kindness toward a struggling veteran father has blossomed into a community-wide initiative. The words seemed to leap off the page, each one a tiny dagger to his chest. Though the article didn't name him directly, anyone who'd been in the store that day would know exactly who the struggling veteran father was. "Is that Maria's store?" Lily asked, leaning across the table to peek at the paper. "She's so nice. Remember the balloon she gave me?" Jack folded the paper quickly, forcing a smile. "Yes, sweetheart. She is very nice." He glanced around the diner, suddenly aware of the sideways glances from other patrons. Mrs. Henderson from church was whispering to her husband, their eyes darting his way. The elderly couple by the window offered him warm, sympathetic smiles that made his neck burn. "Are you finished with your pancakes?" Jack asked, eager to leave. "We need to get to church soon." The walk to church was only 3 blocks, but it felt like miles. Every person they passed seemed to look at them differently now. Old Mr. Wilson, who usually just nodded curtly, actually stopped to shake Jack's hand. "Thank you for your service, son," he said with such earnest sincerity that Jack didn't know how to respond. But not everyone was so kind. As they passed the hardware store, Jack overheard 2 men talking near the entrance. Veterans these days. Always looking for handouts. One muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Whatever happened to good old-fashioned hard work? Jack's jaw clenched, but he kept walking, guiding Lily with a gentle hand on her shoulder. He'd faced worse in combat than small-town gossip, he told himself. Still, the words stung more than he wanted to admit. The church was already filling up when they arrived. Jack and Lily slipped into their usual pew near the back, but today felt different. The usual comfortable anonymity was gone. Some people made a point of coming over to greet them warmly, too warmly, like they were fragile things that might break. Others seemed to deliberately avoid eye contact. During the sermon, Jack caught snippets of whispered conversations. Single father. So sad. But should we really enable? Lily tugged at his sleeve halfway through the service. "Daddy," she whispered, her small face creased with concern. "Why are people looking at us funny? And why are they whispering?" Jack's heart clenched. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Sometimes people just like to talk, sweetheart," he said, keeping his voice light and steady. "Don't worry about it. Hey, look, Mrs. Baker is wearing that hat you like, the one with the flowers." The distraction worked, and Lily giggled at the elaborate hat, but Jack's stomach remained in knots. After the service, he declined the usual invitation to coffee hour, making excuses about homework and chores. The walk home was quiet, Lily humming softly to herself while Jack's mind raced. The article had meant well, he knew that. Maria and the store were doing something genuinely good for the community, but being the face of that goodness, even anonymously, felt like a spotlight on his failures. When they reached their small apartment, Jack helped Lily with her coat and shoes before heading to the kitchen to start lunch. That's when he saw it again, the eviction notice sitting on the counter where he'd left it yesterday. The stark white paper seemed to mock him now, its threat even more potent in light of the day's events. He picked up the notice, reading the words he'd already memorized. 30 days notice to vacate. His fingers traced the edges of the paper as he stood there, frozen between gratitude for the kindness he'd received and shame at needing it in the first place. Lily's voice floated from the living room where she was playing with her dolls, a reminder of everything at stake. The kindness of strangers had given them a beautiful birthday celebration, but would it be enough to keep a roof over their heads? And at what cost to his dignity? Jack set the notice back down, his hand lingering on the counter. Through the thin walls he could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door singing along to her radio, the familiar Spanish lyrics, a reminder that life went on, regardless of pride or shame. He stood there in his small kitchen, caught between the warmth of community support and the cold reality of his situation, wondering which would ultimately win out. The Monday morning sun cast long shadows across Mrs. Henderson's front yard as Jack worked on her broken fence. His tools lay scattered around him, the familiar weight of a hammer in his hand, providing some comfort after yesterday's uncomfortable spotlight at church. The rhythmic sound of nails being driven into wood helped quiet his troubled thoughts. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" Jack looked up to find Maria standing there, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She wore her grocery store uniform, apparently on her break. The morning light caught the silver cross necklace at her throat. "You don't have to." Jack started, but Maria was already settling onto the porch steps. "Mrs. Henderson mentioned you were out here working. She's been worried about this fence for months." Maria held out one of the coffees. "Cream, no sugar," I remembered from the store. Jack hesitated before accepting the cup, his calloused hands careful not to brush against her fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly, taking a sip to avoid conversation. "My ex-husband used to do all our home repairs," Maria said after a moment, her voice gentle. "When he left, I had to learn everything from YouTube videos. Took me 3 tries to fix a leaky faucet." Jack glanced at her, surprised by her openness. "Must have been tough. Still is sometimes." Maria smiled, though her eyes held old pain. "Being a single parent, some days you feel like you're failing at everything. But God always seems to send help when I need it most, even if it's just a kind neighbor showing me how to unclog a drain." Jack drove another nail into the fence post, considering her words. "Lily's mother, she passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." The words came out rough, unpracticed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough for her. I see how you are with her," Maria said softly. "The way you made sure she had a birthday cake, even when." She trailed off, not wanting to embarrass him. "Even when I couldn't afford it." Jack finished, meeting her eyes. "I know people are talking. People always talk. But they're also watching how you're handling it. With dignity and by giving back." Maria gestured to the fence. "Like this. And I heard about you helping the Martinez boy fix his bike last week." Jack shrugged, but felt warmth spread through his chest. Kid just needed someone to show him how. His mom works 2 jobs, doesn't have time for bike repairs. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee. A cool breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of Mrs. Henderson's rose bushes. "You know," Maria said finally, "the food pantry we're setting up at the store could use someone with handyman skills. Shelves need assembling, that sort of thing." "I don't need." Jack started to protest. "It's not about needing," Maria interrupted gently. "It's about being part of something bigger than ourselves. The whole community is coming together. Even my son Miguel is helping, sorting cans after school." Jack thought about it as he hammered the last fence post into place. The idea of working in secret, after hours, appealed to him. No pitying looks, no whispers, just quiet service. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Jack slipped out to the store. Maria showed him to the back room where boxes of donations waited to be sorted. They worked side by side, their shadows stretching long across the floor under fluorescent lights. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Jack would spend his days helping neighbors, mowing Mrs. Wilson's overgrown lawn, teaching young Tommy Garcia basic car maintenance, fixing loose shutters for the elderly couple down the street. Each task rebuilt a small piece of his self-worth. At the community center, he found himself mentoring Jason, a troubled 15-year-old with a chip on his shoulder that Jack recognized all too well. They worked on old motorcycles together, Jack's patient instruction slowly breaking through the boys' defensive walls. Lily bloomed under the changes in their life. She started bringing home art projects from school, drawings of her father fixing things, helping people. "My daddy makes things better," she told her teacher proudly. The words echoed in Jack's heart, healing old wounds. Every evening, he'd head to the food pantry. Sometimes Maria would be there, sometimes just a note telling him what needed doing. They shared coffee and conversation, trading stories about their children, their struggles, their faith. Maria's quiet strength and unwavering belief that God had a plan began to soften Jack's hardened edges. One particular evening, Jack organized boxes while Lily did homework at a small table nearby, humming as she worked on math problems. The sound of her contentment mixed with the peaceful rhythm of stocking shelves made something tight in his chest begin to loosen. "Daddy," Lily called out, "can I help put the cans in order? I'm good at organizing things." "Sure, princess." Jack smiled, watching as she carefully arranged soup cans by color. "Just like rainbow order, right?" "Exactly," Lily beamed. "Maria taught me that when she helped in our class last week. She said sometimes making things pretty helps people feel better about asking for help." Jack paused, a box of pasta in his hands. He hadn't known Maria volunteered at Lily's school. The thought of her looking out for his daughter, even in small ways, stirred something warm in his heart. The bell above the pantry door chimed softly as Maria entered, carrying fresh donations. She smiled at the sight of father and daughter working together, Lily proudly showing off her rainbow of soup cans. "That's beautiful, Lily," Maria praised, setting down her boxes. "You have quite the artistic eye." "Just like her mother," Jack said softly, the words no longer carrying their usual sting. Lily finished her display and skipped back to her homework, leaving Jack and Maria to sort through the new donations. They worked in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of practice. As closing time approached, Jack gathered his tools and Lily's school books. "Say goodbye to Maria, sweetheart." "Goodbye, thank you for teaching me about rainbows." Lily hugged Maria's legs before darting to the door. Jack nodded his thanks, unable to find words for everything he wanted to say. As he and Lily walked out into the cool evening air, Maria stood in the doorway, watching them go. Her lips moved silently in prayer, the silver cross at her throat catching the last light of day. Lily's clear voice drifted through their small apartment as she practiced Amazing Grace for the 100th time that week. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, clutching a hairbrush like a microphone, her stuffed animals arranged as an audience on her bed. Jack leaned against her doorframe, watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and worry. The eviction notice weighed heavy in his back pocket, but he pushed the thought away, focusing on Lily's determined expression as she hit the high notes. "How does it sound, Daddy?" Lily asked, dropping the hairbrush to her side. "Beautiful, sweetheart. Just like your mom." The words caught in his throat. Sarah had been the musical one, always singing around the house. "Want to try it one more time?" Lily nodded, her small fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress, the same one she'd worn to church last Easter. "What if I mess up? What if everyone laughs?" Jack crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Hey, look at me." He waited until her eyes met his. "You're braver than you know. And your voice? It's a gift straight from heaven." Later that evening, they pulled into the school parking lot. The autumn air felt crisp, and stars were just beginning to peek through the darkening sky. Jack's truck, with its rusty fenders and squeaky brakes, stood out among the newer vehicles filling the spaces. "Ready, kiddo?" Jack helped Lily straighten the blue ribbon in her hair. Inside the school auditorium, Jack's heart sank. The place was packed. He hadn't expected such a turnout, and his first instinct was to find seats in the back where they wouldn't draw attention. But before he could retreat, he heard someone calling his name. "Jack, over here." It was Maria. waving from the middle section. She'd saved 2 seats right next to her. As they made their way over, Jack noticed familiar faces everywhere. Mrs. Henderson from next door, the teenagers he'd helped at the community center, even his old supervisor from the factory. "Break a leg, Lily," whispered Mr. Chen from the grocery store as they passed by. The elderly man had been slipping extra fruit into their bags lately, always with a conspiratorial wink. Lily squeezed Jack's hand before heading backstage with the other performers. He sat down next to Maria, who smiled warmly. "The whole town's been talking about Lily's performance," she said softly. "Everyone wanted to be here." Jack swallowed hard, looking around at the faces of people he'd helped over the past few weeks, fixing porches, teaching kids to change bike tires, sharing what little he had. They weren't just neighbors anymore. They were something more. The lights dimmed, and the show began. Jack barely registered the first few acts, his leg bouncing nervously as he waited for Lily's turn. When she finally stepped onto the stage in her Easter dress, looking so small under the bright lights, his heart nearly stopped. The piano introduction began, and Lily's voice, clear as a bell, filled the auditorium. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. The familiar words took on new meaning as she sang, her eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music. By the second verse, Jack noticed tissues being passed around. Mrs. Henderson dabbed at her eyes, and even tough old Mr. Peterson from the hardware store was wiping his cheeks. When Lily reached the line about "Grace will lead me home," her voice carrying all the innocence and hope of her 8 years, Jack felt tears rolling down his own face. She'd chosen this song for Sarah, who used to sing it as a lullaby. Everyone knew the story now. The veteran who'd lost his wife, struggling to raise their daughter alone. But tonight, it wasn't pity in their eyes. It was something else entirely. The final note faded, and for a moment, complete silence filled the room. Then the applause started. Not polite clapping, but a thunderous standing ovation. Lily beamed, searching the crowd until she found Jack's face. He stood, clapping until his hands hurt, as pride and love overwhelmed him. People reached across seats to pat his shoulder, shake his hand. "That's your girl," they said. "She's something special." Maria squeezed his arm, her eyes shining with tears and something deeper. After the show, it took them nearly an hour to leave. Everyone wanted to congratulate Lily, to share a kind word or a hug. The choir director asked if Lily would join the children's chorus at church. The music teacher mentioned scholarship possibilities for voice lessons. The drive home was quiet, but peaceful. Lily had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, still clutching the participation ribbon they'd given all the performers. Jack glanced at her, then up at the stars scattered across the night sky. "Maybe we're going to be okay," he whispered, allowing himself to believe it for just a moment. But reality crashed back as soon as they arrived home. There on the kitchen table, illuminated by the streetlight streaming through the window, lay the landlord's final notice. The stark white envelope seemed to glow in the darkness, a reminder that their time here was running out. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting a harsh spotlight on the eviction notice that lay on the counter. Jack sat at the worn kitchen table, his coffee growing cold, untouched. His calloused fingers traced the wood grain patterns, mind churning with dark thoughts. Lily bounced into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, pigtails swaying. She grabbed the notice with innocent curiosity. "Are we going on another adventure, Daddy?" Jack's throat tightened. He forced a weak smile, taking the paper from her small hands. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see. Like camping?" Lily's eyes sparkled. "Remember when we went camping last summer? Something like that." Jack stood up, tucking the notice into his back pocket. "Time for school, princess. Got your homework?" While Lily chattered about her upcoming spelling test, Jack's mind wandered to the cardboard boxes stacked in their storage closet. Maybe it would be easier to pack up quietly, slip away in the night. No goodbyes, no explanations needed. The thought of facing more whispers, more judgment, made his stomach churn. At the school drop-off, he noticed Mrs. Peterson, a regular at the grocery store, whispering to another parent. Their eyes darted his way, then quickly away. He'd seen that look before. Pity mixed with suspicion. Walking down Main Street afterward, he He caught fragments of conversation from the coffee shop patio. Taking advantage. Heard he's not even looking for work. The words stung like paper cuts. Inside the grocery store, he kept his head down, avoiding the donation jar that had once seemed like such a blessing. Now it felt like a spotlight on his failures. He grabbed milk and bread, essential items only, paying with the last of his disability check. Maria was working the register. Her warm brown eyes studied his face with concern as she scanned his items. "Jack? Are you okay?" "Fine." He fumbled with his wallet, not meeting her gaze. "You missed the pantry meeting last night," she said softly. "We were hoping you'd come. Mr. Roberts really appreciated how you organized the shelving system." "Been busy." Jack cut her off, his voice gruff. "Thanks for everything, but we'll manage." Maria reached across the counter, touching his arm gently. "Don't shut us out, Jack. The community cares about you and Lily." "That's just it," he interrupted, pulling away. "I'm tired of being the community charity case, the broken veteran who can't provide for his daughter." His voice cracked slightly. "You don't understand." "I understand pride," Maria said quietly. "I understand fear, but running away isn't the answer." Jack grabbed his grocery bag. "Sometimes it's the only answer." He turned to leave, then paused. "The kindness you showed us, I'll never forget it. But maybe it's time we stop depending on it." Throughout the day, he wandered the streets, unable to face the apartment and its looming emptiness. He passed the community center where he'd been helping teens learn basic carpentry, the senior center where he'd fixed the rickety front steps. Each place held memories of connection, of purpose, now tainted by whispers of taking advantage. At the park, he overheard two women on a bench. "Did you read about that veteran in the paper? Now everyone's falling over themselves to help, but my cousin says he hasn't even applied for the jobs she suggested." Jack's hands clenched into fists. They didn't know about the nightmares that still plagued him, the anxiety that gripped him in crowded places, the shame of failing interview after interview. They didn't understand how hard he tried to be worthy of the kindness shown to him. That evening he went through the motions of dinner with Lily, amazed at how she could still find joy in simple things. The shape of her sandwich, the way the sunset painted their walls orange. She showed him her spelling test. Perfect score. "Mrs. Johnson says I might get to read my poem at assembly next week," Lily said, helping him wash dishes. "Will you come watch, Daddy?" Jack's heart squeezed. "We'll see, sweetie. Things might be a little different next week. Because of our new adventure?" He nodded, unable to speak. Later, tucking her into bed, Jack struggled to maintain his composure. Lily hugged her stuffed giraffe, a gift from Maria, and smiled up at him. "Daddy, can we invite Miss Maria on our adventure? She makes the best cookies." "Time for sleep, princess." Jack kissed her forehead, adjusting her nightlight. Sweet dreams. Only when he was sure Lily was asleep did Jack allow himself to break. Sitting on the edge of his bed, face buried in his hands, he wept silently. Tears for the hope that had flickered so briefly, for the community that had embraced them, for the dignity he couldn't seem to hold on to. The eviction notice lay on his nightstand, a stark reminder that sometimes kindness wasn't enough. Sometimes, no matter how hard you tried, the world pushed you back down. Through his window he could see the lights of town twinkling, each one representing a person who had tried to help. But in the end, he was still Jack Turner. Broken, struggling, and alone. The early morning light crept through the apartment windows, casting long shadows across the worn carpet. Jack sat on the edge of his bed, head buried in his hands, the weight of their situation pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. He didn't hear Lily's soft footsteps until she was right beside him. "Daddy?" Her small hand touched his arm. When he looked up, her face held a wisdom beyond her 8 years. She wrapped her arms around his neck in a tight hug. "Remember my birthday cake? One little thing changed everything." Jack's breath caught in his throat. The memory flooded back, that desperate day at the grocery store, counting coins, the shame burning his cheeks. But then there was Maria's quiet kindness, the unexpected balloon bobbing cheerfully above the cake. and Lily's radiant smile. One simple act that had sparked so much more. He pulled back slightly, studying his daughter's face. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Well," Lily said, settling beside him on the bed. "Before the cake, you were always sad. But then Miss Maria was nice, and you started helping people, and now we have friends everywhere." She swung her legs, hitting the bed frame with gentle thumps. "Like Mr. Peterson, who teaches me about his garden, and Mrs. Henderson, who gives me cookies when I visit." Jack's throat tightened. He remembered the satisfaction of fixing Mrs. Henderson's fence, the pride in teaching the teenagers at the community center basic carpentry skills. Each small act of service had connected them more deeply to this town, this community that had embraced them despite his initial resistance. "And remember Tommy?" Lily continued, referring to the troubled teen Jack had been mentoring. "His mom told Miss Maria that he's doing better in school now, because of you." Jack stood up, running a hand through his hair. The morning sun caught the familiar balloon string still hanging from Lily's bedpost. Faded now, but a constant reminder of that pivotal moment. He thought of all the lives that had intertwined with theirs over the past weeks, the web of connections that had grown from one simple act of kindness. "You're right about the cake, Lilybug," he said softly. "It did change things. It did change things. It did change things." After getting Lily ready for school and dropping her off, Jack found himself driving toward the community center. He'd heard about their leaking faucet last week, before the eviction notice had derailed everything. His tools were still in the truck, and he had a few hours before his afternoon job search. The community center was quiet this early, just a few seniors gathering for their morning coffee club. They waved as he passed, and Jack managed a small smile in return. The familiar scent of coffee and old books wrapped around him as he made his way to the kitchen. The leaking faucet greeted him with its steady drip, drip, drip. Jack set his toolbox down and got to work, losing himself in the familiar motions. This he understood, the simple logic of pipes and washers, problems that could be fixed with the right tools and patience. Unlike life's bigger challenges, a leaking faucet had clear solutions. As he worked, his mind wandered to Lily's words. One little thing really had changed everything. Before Maria's act of kindness, he'd been drowning in isolation, too proud to accept help, too ashamed to admit he needed it. The cake and balloon hadn't just been about making Lily happy, they'd been a lifeline, pulling him back into the world of human connection. He thought about Tommy, the teenager he'd been mentoring. The boy reminded Jack of himself at that age, angry at the world, trying to be tough while hiding deep hurt. Teaching Tommy basic carpentry hadn't just been about skills. It had been about showing him that someone cared, that he had value beyond his circumstances. The sound of footsteps pulled Jack from his thoughts. He was just tightening the last fitting when a familiar voice broke the silence. "I had a feeling I'd find you here." Jack straightened up, wiping his hands on his jeans. Maria stood in the doorway, her grocery store apron still on, determination written across her face. "The faucet needed fixing," he said simply, starting to pack up his tools. "You're not leaving, Jack. Not like this." Maria's voice was firm but gentle, like the way she spoke to her own son when he was being stubborn. Jack's hands stilled over his toolbox. He couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes, to see the concern he knew would be there, the same concern that had started everything with a birthday cake and a balloon. The kindness that had gradually rebuilt his sense of worth and belonging. "Maria, he began. But she cut him off. "No, Jack. You don't get to disappear on us. Not after everything. Not after showing this community what real strength looks like." He looked up then, confused. "Strength? I'm about to be evicted. I can barely keep food on the table. How is that strength?" Maria stepped closer, her eyes intense. "You're not leaving," she repeated. "Not like this." The church hall buzzed with hushed conversations as Maria Lopez stood at the front, her hands clasped tightly together. Through the tall windows, morning sunlight streamed in, warming the wooden pews where dozens of townspeople. Saturday Pastor Green nodded encouragingly from his seat in the front row. "I know some of you have heard rumors about Jack Turner," Maria began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I want to tell you about the man I've come to know. The father who spent his last dollars on his daughter's birthday cake. The neighbor who's been quietly helping all of us. even when he had nothing to give. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman from 2 streets over, raised her hand. "That young man fixed my fence last month. Wouldn't take a penny for it, just smiled and said it was the neighborly thing to do. He helped my Tommy with math," called out another voice. "Spent hours after school, patient as could be. My boy's grades are up for the first time in years." More stories poured forth, like a dam breaking. The mechanic mentioned how Jack had helped reorganize his shop one weekend. The librarian recalled him reading to children during story time. Each tale painted a picture of a man who gave freely of himself, even in his darkest hours. "That's the thing about Jack," Maria continued, her eyes bright. "He never wanted handouts. Every kindness shown to him, he multiplied it and passed it on. But now he and Lily need us. They're facing eviction, and Jack's too proud to ask for help." A heavy silence fell over the room. In the back, Bob Miller, a retired veteran with weathered skin and sharp eyes, cleared his throat. "I've got that old RV sitting in my backyard. Been meaning to sell it, but it's clean and running. They could use it while they get back on their feet." Pastor Green stood up, smoothing his worn suit jacket. "The church has that empty apartment above the community center. We've been saving it for emergencies. Well, this is exactly what it's meant for. And I've spoken with Tom at the construction company. They need someone with Jack's skills for their new project." The energy in the room shifted, hope crackling like electricity. People began offering what they could: furniture, clothes for Lily, job leads. Sarah from the diner promised free meals. The hardware store owner mentioned needing part-time help. At the back of the room, Jenny Martinez, the local reporter who'd written the original story about the donation jar, scribbled furiously in her notebook. Her eyes were wet as she captured each detail, each offer of help, each story of Jack's quiet impact on the community. Maria watched it all unfold, her heart swelling. This was what community meant, not just sharing resources, but recognizing the dignity and worth in each person. She thought of Jack's calloused hands, always ready to help, and Lily's bright smile that could light up a room. Later that afternoon, Maria led Jack and Lily to the church hall, claiming she needed help moving some boxes. When they pushed open the heavy wooden doors, they found the room full of familiar faces. Jack stopped short, Lily pressing close to his side. Pastor Green stepped forward, holding out a set of keys. "These are yours, Jack, for the apartment above the community center. No strings attached, just a neighbor helping a neighbor." Bob Miller emerged from the crowd, another key ring dangling from his finger. "And this one's for the RV. It's yours as long as you need it. Could be good for weekend camping with Lily, too." Jack's hands trembled as he accepted the keys, his throat working. "I don't deserve this," he whispered to Maria, who stood beside him with tears in her eyes. She touched his arm gently. "You already gave it first, Jack. Every time you helped someone without being asked. Every time you put others before yourself. This isn't charity, it's your kindness coming back to you." Lily tugged at her father's sleeve, her eyes wide with wonder. "See, Daddy? Just like my birthday cake?" One little thing changed everything. The room erupted in warm laughter, and people began coming forward with hugs, handshakes, and more offers of help. Tom from the construction company pressed his business card into Jack's hand, mentioning a project starting next week. The hardware store owner talked about flexible hours and employee benefits. Jenny Martinez watched from the corner, her pen flying across her notepad. The headline was already forming in her mind: "The Single Dad Who Inspired a Town." This time, she knew, the story would capture not just one act of kindness, but an entire community transformed by a man who gave when he had nothing left to give. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting a golden glow over the gathering. Jack stood in the midst of it all, one arm around Lily, the keys clutched in his other hand. For once, he didn't try to hide the tears that slipped down his cheeks. "Welcome home," Maria said softly. And all around them, their neighbors, their family, smiled in agreement. Warm sunlight poured through the windows of Jack and Lily Turner's modest home, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beams. The small living room, once sparse and shadowed by uncertainty, now held the comfortable signs of a life well lived: family photos on the walls, a handmade quilt draped over the sofa, and children's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. Jack sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and watching Lily arrange paper streamers with meticulous care. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she stood on a chair, determined to make everything perfect for her 9th birthday party. A year had passed since that desperate morning when he'd counted his last dollars, praying they'd stretch far enough for a simple cake. The screen door creaked open, followed by the familiar sound of Maria's gentle laugh. "Knock, knock! Birthday delivery service," she called out, her arms laden with grocery bags. Her 7-year-old son Miguel darted past her, making a beeline for Lily. "Need help with those?" Jack asked, already rising from his chair. "My hero," Maria teased, passing him several bags. Their fingers brushed, and Jack felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. These small moments had been happening more frequently lately. Lingering glances, gentle touches, shared smiles that held unspoken possibilities. "Miss Lily," Miguel called out, "can I help with the decorations?" Lily beamed down from her perch. "You can hand me the tape. But carefully. We're making it extra special this year." Jack and Maria moved around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease, unpacking groceries and preparing party snacks. They'd fallen into this comfortable rhythm over the past year, sharing meals, school pickups, and quiet evenings while the kids played. Maria had become more than just the cashier who'd changed his life with one act of kindness. She was his closest friend, his confidant, and maybe, just maybe, something more. "Remember last year's cake?" Maria asked softly, pulling out ingredients for the homemade birthday cake she'd insisted on baking. Who would have thought one little cake could start such a chain reaction? Jack paused, a package of paper plates in his hands. "I think about that every day," he admitted. "How close I was to giving up. How ashamed I felt standing at your register." He shook his head, still amazed by the journey. "Now look at us." Maria's eyes softened as she reached out to squeeze his arm. "God works in mysterious ways, Jack Turner. Sometimes he sends angels with grocery store name tags." The afternoon sun climbed higher as guests began arriving. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous potato salad. Bob Miller parked his RV outside for the kids to play in, and Pastor Green arrived with his wife and a wrapped present. The house filled with the warm buzz of conversation and laughter. Jack watched from the kitchen doorway as Lily showed Miguel and some school friends her new collection of books, a gift from the library staff where she now spent Saturday mornings reading to younger children, just as her father had done. She'd grown so much in the past year, not just in height but in confidence. The shadow of uncertainty that had once haunted her young eyes had been replaced by steady joy. Tom from the construction company clapped Jack on the shoulder as he passed. "Site supervisor position's still yours whenever you're ready," he reminded Jack. "You've more than earned it." The promotion offer still felt surreal. Jack had started as a basic laborer, grateful just to have steady work. But his attention to detail and natural leadership hadn't gone unnoticed. Between that and his part-time work at the hardware store, they were finally building a secure future. Maria appeared at his side, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, following his gaze to where Lily was now teaching Miguel a clapping game. "Just thinking about how different everything is from last year," Jack replied. "Back then I could barely keep food on the table. Now look, we're hosting parties. I've got 2 jobs I love. Lily's thriving in school." He turned to face Maria, his voice growing softer. "And you're here." A faint blush colored Maria's cheeks as she met his eyes. "I'm glad I am," she whispered. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken feelings and gentle possibility. Then Miguel's voice broke through. "Mom, the cake. Is it ready?" Maria laughed, the spell broken but not forgotten. "Coming, mijo." "Jack, can you help me with the candles?" Together, they carried the beautiful homemade cake to the dining room table. Jack's throat tightened as he took in the scene. The table that had once been empty now groaned under the weight of food and friendship. Neighbors who had once been strangers now felt like family. Even the house itself, the apartment above the community center that had started as temporary shelter, had become a true home. "Everyone gather round," Pastor Green called out. "Time for the birthday girl's big moment." Lily took her place at the head of the table, her eyes shining as Maria lit the candles. The warm glow illuminated her face, and the eager faces of friends clustered around her. Jack stood behind her chair, one hand resting on her shoulder, while Maria and Miguel stood close by. As everyone began singing Happy Birthday, Jack felt tears prick at his eyes. He looked around the room at all the faces. Mrs. Henderson, who now treated Lily like a granddaughter. Bob Miller, who'd taught her to play chess. Jenny Martinez, who'd helped change the narrative of their lives with her compassionate reporting. Each person represented a thread in the tapestry of support that had lifted them from their darkest hour. But most of all, he looked at Maria, who caught his gaze and smiled that smile that made his heart skip. She'd been the first, the one who saw past his shame to his humanity, who'd sparked hope with a simple cake and balloon. Now, a year later, she was still here, still believing in him, still showing him daily what faith and love looked like in action. The song ended, and Lily closed her eyes, her face scrunched in concentration as she prepared to make her wish. The room fell silent except for the soft crackle of candles. In that moment, Jack bowed his head slightly, offering his own silent prayer. He thanked God for Maria's generous heart, for his daughter's resilient spirit, and for the profound truth Lily had recognized long before he did, that one small act of kindness, offered without expectation, really could change everything. Around him, cheers erupted as Lily drew in a deep breath and blew out her candles. To find out what happens next, click the video on your screen right now. Don't forget to subscribe, because more stories of faith, redemption, and second chances are coming, and you won't want to miss them. And in the comments, tell us, what do you think Jack's next chapter will be? Could Maria's kindness become something even greater? We want to hear your theories. If you believe in the power of stories that inspire hope, compassion, and redemption, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined this community. Every time you like, comment, or share, you help keep these messages of faith and love alive. And as you go about your day, please remember this: you are seen, you are valued, and your story matters. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay kind, and keep believing that even the smallest act of love can change everything.